The presenting sponsor of Moon Tower Soccer is FVF Law.
To find out what makes FVF a different kind of injury law firm, you can visit fvf.law.
Hello friends, and thanks for listening to Moon Tower Soccer. This week we will discuss Austin's victory over Minnesota, the loss to Real Salt Lake. We'll talk about what Josh Wolf's future might look like, and we'll cover some other Austin FC news. We're also going to be joined by our friend Adrian Healey to preview this weekend's match against Sporting Kansas City. My name is Landon Cottom, and I'm joined, as always, by Mr. Jeremiah Bentley.
Hey, everybody. I'm Jeremiah Bentley. And Landon, we've talked before this and online and in a lot of ways about how this is a very angsty week in the Austin FC fan base. And I think this show will probably reflect that a bit. Although I was just telling somebody, it's like, we're going to try to be positive and constructive. And the guy's like, positive? And I was like, okay, we're going to try to be constructive for sure. I don't know if there's any way to be like 1,000,000% positive about this, but we're going to do our best to keep the hot takes at minimum and really dig into what's going on with Austin FC right now over the last week.
So one positive thing I will say is at the second team game on Friday, which I think they ended up winning 3-0. And that was a fun game to watch for a change. I went out at halftime to buy a beer, ended up meeting a listener in line. I believe his name was Matt, very nice gentleman. And I was asking him would I know your name on Twitter or like Los Verdes Slack or anything like that? And he's like, no, I don't do any of that. I just listen to the show. And I was like, God bless you, Matt. You're my favorite listener now. Because I frankly have been pretty fed up with Twitter lately. I went on vacation last week and knew watching those two losses, the Chicago game and the Houston game, I knew already that I didn't have to talk about them. And then I was on vacation, just sitting next to a pool, just hanging out, relaxing for 3 or 4 days. And to be honest, I think it broke my give a shit a little bit. And coming back and seeing people being just super negative. And this is before today. This is last week after we were actually doing okay for a little bit and then lost a couple of games. I was already getting annoyed with social media and just people griping about things. And so to meet Matt there in the beer line and to hear that he's not on Twitter, he doesn't really do any of that. He just likes listening to the show. That it made my heart feel good. So it was a pleasure to meet you, Matt.
Well, let's shout out to Matt. The guy I was talking to today was also Matt, but I have a feeling it was 99% sure it was a different Matt. So maybe Matts are just beautiful, positive humans. I don't know. We'll see.
That being said, we do have a lot to talk about today. And I think this is going to be any Seinfeld fans. We're going to have a bit of a Festivus show, and the whole show is going to be sprinkled through with airings of grievances. So we've got a lot of problems with you people, and you're going to hear about it.
All right. Well, let's I don't know how to transition to the Austin FC news now. The best thing that happened all week was Owen Wolff making it into the round of 8 in the U20 World Cup, which ended, was it yesterday? The U.S. national team lost to Uruguay in the quarterfinals. So yeah, that's on Sunday, but yeah, great, strong performance overall. Owen played pretty well, got a lot of minutes. I don't think probably anybody's super sad about him being knocked out of the tournament and hopefully getting him back at some point. But do we think we'll see him before the 10th, or we just expect that Owen's out until after the break's over?
I mean, he will be back in town almost certainly. But as far as him getting back into the lineup, he played a lot of games. They were playing really tight back to back. He started most of the games. And so even if he's in town and ready to go, you have to take into account his fitness. And then also just guys at his position have been looking okay. Johan Valencia has done well. Sophie Jafal has had some decent performances. So if you're factoring that in, there's not urgency to force him back into a lineup before he's physically ready for it. And so I would not be surprised if he did not show up on the game day 20 for Sporting Kansas City.
Yeah, and then in other national team news, we got the official news that Danny Pereira would get his call up to the Venezuelan Football Federation for a pair of matches during the break. So he's supposed to play against Honduras in DC and Guatemala in Hartford, Connecticut. It's good for Danny. It's a cool piece of news for him. Been a strong performer. We'll probably talk about this steer of the week, but especially for Sporting KC, I thought he really stood out as the player with the best offensive thoughts. Like he was the best player on the field for Austin for sure in that match. So good to see him to continue to develop and get some recognition.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of national teams, there was also a bit of hope for another international call-up. Julio Cascante was on the preliminary roster for Costa Rica for what tournament was that for? Was that Gold Cup?
I think it was Gold Cup. Yep.
Okay, yeah, he was on the preliminary roster. A few days later, the official roster was announced, and he was not on it. So, sad for Julio. It'd be cool to see him get rewarded with a call-up, but it's probably for the best for Austin FC that he doesn't have to spend any time traveling or miss any games.
Yeah, I'd say the only functioning healthy center back of any note for Austin is Julio Cascante right now. So I'm very happy. I don't do you think that club has any influence when it comes to something like that? Like, can they ask? Show the situation, maybe ask, like, it would be better if you would maybe save him for a future match or something like that.
They can ask, but for official competitions like this, they are not allowed to just say no. They can't say no. And so depending on their relationship between like the player, the agent, the federation, the front or like the setup, the coaching setup of the national team, like I think that at times there are concessions made where it's like, hey, let us keep him for this one and we'll send him for the next thing. But in this situation, like my guess is that he made that preliminary roster and then probably guys are just picked ahead of him.
Yeah, but it's neat to see him in the mix, like you said. Also, probably good for Austin that he's not. Then we also got the news: the All-Star, super complicated All-Star voting process is open. If you're a fan, you can go to MLSsoccer.com and vote for all your favorite Austin players for the All-Star tournament, which is going to take place in DC, which is sold out now, I believe, but that's fine. Remember, the fan vote is 1/3 of the breakdown to determine who makes it in to the match, along with 1/3 from the media and 1/3 from the current MLS players. So vote early, vote often for your favorite Austin players. A lot of players on the ballot.
Oh, real talk. Are there any Austin FC players that deserve to make this team?
Brad Stuver always deserves to be on this team.
Yeah, I'm not going to argue with that one. Anybody
now, other
else?
than that, is anybody else having a great? Well, Danny's having the strongest year, I feel like, out of anybody else.
Danny's having a good year.
Like.
I don't, realistically speaking, I don't think results or like his just like score sheet stats are going. He
does not have eye popping stats. You're right, for sure.
But as far as just like, oh my God, this guy's actually really good. Like, I think that that level of sensation like gets him maybe in the conversation. But there are a lot of really good midfielders in this league. I think the other argument is maybe John Gallagher. He's leading our team in scoring, is high up, if not leading the league for defenders in scoring.
He is leading the league for defenders in scoring, I'm pretty sure. Or was through Wednesday. I don't know for sure that through Saturday he is.
Yeah, if you are accounting for actual defensive performances by the team and like how many goals have been given up and clean sheets and stuff, like that would probably be a ding against his chances there. But yeah, he's really, I think Stuver and Gallagher are the only ones who I think could get a chance, but just based on like the team's performance overall, I don't know that either of them do have like a real chance of getting into it.
Yeah, and this is another thing with when it's not East versus West game, there's only half as many spots open, right?
Right.
When you're playing against a team from the league, so that's where you can see it's going to be really hard for Brad Stuver to end up ahead of sort of perennial all-stars that have done this over and over again. Did you go to the Austin FC? You went to the FC Throw match, right, on Friday?
Yeah, that's where I met listener Matt.
Right. So overall, strong performance. So Austin had not scored in a while. I think at least a couple matches. Picked up 3 from David Rodriguez and Valentin Noel. Was it as dominant of a performance as it looked like on the score sheet and from watching it on TV? Yeah,
it was. It was RSL. I guess the Real Monarchs is what they're called. They had some dangerous moments, and like Damian Loss had 1 or 2 pretty big saves and some things like that. But yeah, it didn't ever really seem like it was in jeopardy. Like Austin seemed to have it under control, and this was without Noel starting. He came on late. A couple of other guys who normally start didn't start. Kip Keller was not even on the bench, and we'll talk about this in a moment because he was on the bench for the first team. But yeah, somewhat rotated lineup, and was still able to have such a dominant performance.
And Rodriguez continues to shine. Do you think he could show anything for Austin? Do you think he's ready for like the first team at this point? Like he had the 4-day contract, I believe.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, if I had to pick, it's the guys who Josh Wolf has talked about as getting those short-term call-ups are the two who I would say are the most ready, which is Noel and Rodriguez. I don't think he's like so dominant in Next Pro that it would be a sure thing. But I mean, he is good, and so like it wouldn't surprise me if like not this year just because of his contract status, but maybe next year if like some guys like their contracts are ending or things are moving around, and it wouldn't surprise me if he got a look, if at least in like preseason, to get a first team contract so he could actually get more minutes with the first team.
All right, and one more thing that I think we have to cover before we get into the two matches this week, and then the preview with Adrian. Did you get your ticket bill, and did it change?
It did. It changed by a little over 14%, I think.
So that's interesting. I was a little over 14% also. I'm in 106, which is right next to supporter section. I'm 1 at 14. You're what are you?
232.
232. Also 14%. That seemed to be pretty much a general trend. If you want to, the False 9 Texas, which has become, which started as like a news parody source, has become like an actual source of real news and information. I don't know how to feel about that, but they did a good job of talking to a bunch of different fans and getting a handle on how much tickets have gone up. And I don't know, it's kind of frustrating, especially given what's going on, right now. And of course, I read the Austin FC Facebook group, and people are like, prices or things are going to, it's inflation or whatever. Like, that's dumb. Like, inflation is not at 12 to 14% right now. So I feel like it's a real kick in the teeth at this point.
I saw a lot of people saying that like it's pretty audacious for them to announce that while the team isn't good. And like, there's nothing they could do about that. Like, they had to release the price at some point. They probably decided on this price many months ago.
Right, way back, yeah.
If not a year ago or whatever. But it made it hurt that much worse that the team is not good.
Yeah, and I guess, I get, and then I've also read some of this like, well, they've got a huge waiting list. Why wouldn't they try to squeeze every dollar, every fan as much as possible? And I kind of hate that. Like, I get the fact that there's enough demand. There's enough demand that, if how many ever people, and I'm sure this calculation was done, like how many ever people decide to drop for a 14% price increase, there's probably a line twice as long for people that want to that are willing to step in and pay that. But I just feel like it's not good for like fan relationships and like the long-term viability of the club and the long-term viability demand to try to do that. So I'm pretty disappointed on how that turned out.
Yeah. I think one thing that I would say is like maybe a slight silver lining, although it's even barely that, is that they like Austin FC is looking at the secondary market for these tickets, which is still higher than face value most games. And so I'm sure they're looking at those margins and saying like, those could be our margins. And so I say a silver lining because hopefully like it's not going to go up 14% every year. Hopefully they're trying to find like that happy medium where
equilibrium.
Yeah. The secondhand market is not so much more expensive than the primary market. And maybe it balances out, but I could be wrong. Maybe it's just going to do this every year.
Yeah, let's hope not. And I think we were a little bit relieved that it didn't between the first year and the second year. Because I remember that was one of the things with LAFC was that the prices went up a significant, maybe like 15% from year 1 to year 2. So maybe Austin was smart in waiting until between year 2 and year 3 before making that jump.
All right. So anything else before we move into game talk?
No, let's get into game talk.
All right. Well, before we do that, let's take a quick break. Hang tight. We'll be right back with more Moon Tower Soccer. No one is around. Moon Tower Soccer is brought to you by our friends at FVF Law, the official injury lawyers of Austin FC.
FVF is a different kind of personal injury law firm dedicated to community, transparency, and client education. And it's also, I keep running into them or seeing them in other places. So I just saw they were at Ronald McDonald House doing like a project, a volunteer project there. and there's like this corporate battle of the bands thing for the whatever Ham is. Maybe it's still Ham, the Music Health Foundation. And then I was just like looking at some like Austin Generous Business Awards thing, and I think they're up for that too. So like FEF, in addition to being good supporters of us, are really strong partners of the community.
Yeah, and Jeremiah won't say this about himself, so I will. But Jeremiah does a lot of volunteer work and advocacy work within the community. And so if the FEF folks are at the same events as Jeremiah Bentley, then you can probably assume that they're doing good in the community. You can
That's sweet. Thank you, Landon.
You can go to fef.law to find out what makes FEF a different kind of injury law firm and why understanding your legal options can dramatically change the outcome of a case. Once again, that's fef.law. Amplify Credit Union is a member-owned financial cooperative that served the needs of Central Texans for over 5 decades. Amplify's team lives and works in the community, making them the experts on how members can achieve their financial goals.
What makes Amplify different? No bank fees. Amplify is the first financial institution in Texas to put an end to bank fees. In 2022, Americans paid almost $8 billion in overdraft fees alone. Millennials pay an average of $336 a year in bank fees, which works out to 6 Austin FC game tickets per year per person, or 24 pitchers of electric jellyfish in an Austin FC2 match.
That's right. You get a bargain there.
Yeah. You'll pay none of those fees with Amplify Credit Union.
Amplify membership is open to any Texas resident. Learn to trust your bank again at Amplify Credit Union. To learn more, go to www.goamplify.com/moontower. All right, we are back. We have 2 games to talk about. We're going to start off with the first one, which was Minnesota United, which Austin FC ended up winning 2-1. It was a victory at home to end a slide of 2 losses. Luckily, which I did not have to talk about. Thank you, Kevin Morris, for sitting in. I believe last time he was on, we had also lost 2 games in a row.
Poor Kevin.
But ended up winning this one. I guess what are the big talking points here, Jeremiah?
Well, it was nice to get a win. Obviously, it was kind of funny. We took some friends who had never been to a game before, and my guy was actually like, well, who's our best player? And it's like, well, it's that guy. It's that guy on the bench, Sebastian Chirisi, and then when we get the triple sub of the Argentinians, like at the 63rd minute, like the whole place exploded, and it was cool. It's like, yeah, that's the guy. And then to see that guy, him be the guy, and then that guy score the goal was pretty incredible. And just kind of just the way the place reacted, and the environment that night when he got in and like scored the goal that was so important to the result of the match was like amazing. And at that point in time, and I also felt like at that point in time, because Austin was getting a little bit healthier, you begin to see a little bit of what Austin might look like with depth. And then the question became, could Austin string something together from Wednesday to Saturday? Because I think at that point, they had gotten, I think it was like 9 points from 4 matches or whatever, which is among the most in the league. So like things were looking good. Boy, way back on Wednesday night, Thursday morning, it's full of joy and hope and expectations, and then it all came crashing down over the weekend. But overall, solid performance. Austin led in possession. It was one of those games a little 2022-ish because I felt like Austin overperformed, right? All the underlying numbers. Minnesota had more shots on target. Minnesota definitely led next goals, but like when it came down to it, Austin converted the chances they had, and had a strong outing on Wednesday night.
Yeah, I left this game feeling like maybe we did not deserve 3 points just because of how many chances Minnesota got. I think they've finished with over double the expected goals and then almost double the shots taken. Granted, a lot of those shots came very late in the game. It was more even for a lot of the game, but the XG felt pretty true to me as far as like how many more big chances they had. And some of that came down to Brad Stuver. I think he had 3, 4, 5 saves just in stoppage time at the very end of the game.
Yeah, they had the last 7 shots of the match were all Minnesota. After there's Jerisi goal and the Cascante shot, and like the last 7 shots were all Minnesota.
Yeah. So that, I think, Will Trapp hits the crossbar at one point. Someone else hits a post at some point. So there's like Stuver again made some really big saves throughout as well. And so I felt pretty lucky to come away with 3 points. But like you said, we did finish chances when they came to us, and that's what matters most of the time. And we'll talk more about that in the second game too. But you talked about having Driussi back on the bench was big news. Some other big news as far as lineups go is Diego Fagundez was back in the starting lineup, which I think this was his first start since his injury, correct?
Yes, it was. And Sophie Jafal getting this start was also a good bit of news too. And I think he looked pretty strong throughout his time in this match.
Yeah. So the first goal comes in the 19th minute. Julio Cascante plays a long diagonal to Lundqvist. He takes one touch forward, plays across pretty early in towards the box where Zardes and Finley were kind of crashing, and some other players were kind of arriving back in that second wave. John Gallagher is arriving late on the backside, and I think Lundqvist kind of mishits this. I think he's trying to get it in front of Zardes and Finley, kind of along that, just in behind Minnesota's back line. He hits it behind them, but because Gallagher is arriving late in a good spot, like it was where he's supposed to be, the ball bounces once and then he takes it out of the air off of that first bounce and just smashes it in just under the crossbar. So I think the ball getting to him was a little bit fortunate, but it was, as far as like guys making a run into the box to open that room and guys arriving late, like all of that looked like what it was supposed to.
Yeah, it was a really, really well played shot, really well played strike, as you mentioned. It gives his fifth goal in the season, which I believe gives him a 2-goal lead on Jesse Zardes, who's the second leading goal scorer. So
I think Driussi has three as well.
Oh, Driussi has 3 also. Okay, so
yeah.
he's 5. That's right. Driussi and Zardes each with 3. So as we mentioned earlier, he's like really shown out in this role as a wingback in this formation.
Yeah, the lead did not last long. Minnesota scores in the 26th minute. So as they're playing out of the back ring, we were playing in the back 5 look with 3 center backs and the 2 true wing backs playing up and down. Ring follows Hlongwane into the midfield as we're pressing. Hlongwane is able to receive it in between lines and is able to turn Ring and escapes pressure, which I feel like is a thing that like we've seen a little too much for my liking. Is like Alex Ring does a lot to kind of be in the right spots at the right time. But I feel like even in the first 2 years, as all action as he was in the midfield, he just like doesn't win balls. Like, do you remember back in like the first year where we would see him go in for a 50-50 and like clatter a guy and kind of like stop his momentum, but then the ball would squirt out from under his legs and the other team would end up with the ball still?
Yeah, it was that because it's the one he's always looked like he's working so hard, and it's always on the edge. And yeah, it doesn't seem to work out as often as one would think it might.
Yeah, so Hlongwane turns him, is able to get out, plays a through ball for Minder Garcia in behind, ends up 1v1 with Stuver. Lima does well to kind of catch up, but he has help on the side, and so he just plays a sideways ball to Rosales, who hits it into an open net. In real time and upon replay, I am pretty convinced that Minder Garcia was offside whenever this ball gets played. Rewatching, do you remember, did they actually review this? Did they like pause the game to have VAR take a look, or did they just keep playing?
I don't remember. I feel like they kept playing. I did not notice that in real time, and I got a lot just from the Twitter analysis after the match. Just like saw all the debate about it, but I don't remember in the moment it being that big of a deal to the officials.
He definitely didn't go over and look at the monitor though, right?
Right.
Okay. Yeah. So my guess here is like, I think maybe the angle wasn't good enough to overturn it, but man, he looks like he is offside. Like, it's not a good angle, and so it's hard to say. And so maybe that was a deciding factor, but I was very skeptical of that one. We get to halftime, 1-1. Radovanovic comes in at the half for Ring, and so I think there are some people upset that Radovanovic didn't get the start in the first place. My guess here is that this is just minute management for both of these guys. Ring has played a lot of games. Radovanovic is still new and probably still working up to 90-minute fitness, and so this is kind of a way to split the difference and hopefully have them both available for the second game of the week. That ended up not being
Yeah.
possible
Spoiler alert.
because
Yeah.
of the very first play of the second half. There's they kind of like drop the kickoff back to the goalkeeper. Goalkeeper plays a long ball. Radovanovic goes up for a challenge and goes down. And the way he was kind of holding himself and the way that the training staff was kind of fidgeting with him was like, that kind of looks like a dislocated shoulder. And then we got confirmation after the game that's exactly what it was. And so, do you have the quote from Josh Wolf available here? Or should we ad lib it?
Yeah, let's ad lib it. I don't remember exactly what it was. I was
And so
starting to find it earlier.
said it was a dislocated shoulder. They were able to pop it back in. A torn labrum, which is like the membrane around the shoulder joint. And then Josh Wolf also mentioned like a small like bone fracture in the shoulder as well. And so I think a lot of people started Googling this and saying like he's going to be out for a long time then, right? And then in the same sentence, Josh Wolf is like, we hope to get him back in training this week. And maybe he'll be ready again. And so I actually have some experience with this. I dislocated my shoulder many, many times playing high school football and basketball and had a torn labrum. And so I think why there seems to be a disconnect as far as like what the prognosis for that injury could be and why Wolf is still talking about him maybe coming back in. So all that to say that it is possible to have a torn labrum and to not need it to be immediately fixed. The doctors, when I was doing it in high school, they essentially just said there's not, like they did MRIs and stuff. They said there's not any significant damage. It will likely dislocate again, and it could get damaged that time. Like every time you do it, there's always a chance of more damage to happen, but there's no damage now. And so if you want to risk it and continue playing, you can. And so being from West Texas and being in a place where like football comes first, like I was very much the mindset, like I'm going to keep playing until they tell me I can't anymore. And so I would dislocate my shoulder in a game, walk off to the sideline, pop it back in. I'd stay out of the game until I could feel my arm again. And then I'd go back in and finish the game. And that happened probably 10 to 15 times my senior year of high school football. And so I eventually did have surgery on the torn labrum, and they fixed it and I never had the problem again. And so that, I'm guessing that's kind of where Radovanovic is now. Like they're going to check it out. They said he had to sit out of training for a bit. They're going to see if he can do it. Hopefully, I mean, I don't want to encourage anybody to play injured, but if the doctors say he can, he feels like he can, maybe he'll be back soon and can keep going. But eventually he will likely need to get that fixed.
Yeah, well, and I want to add two things about him just while we're talking about him. One, I love Brad Stuver, the post-game match, calling him a crazy MFer, who like never, because he did that and he played the whole second half and he makes this in one of the big chances of this like insane clearance that he made. I think that in extra time. Like
it was
ball that was
towards the
goal.
end. I don't remember the exact minute. Yeah.
So I mean, it wasn't like he was limping around in a liability to the club. Like he was balls to the wall, like for 45 minutes in obviously probably serious pain.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, yeah, we'll talk more about him a little bit later, but he came in and put in a good performance after dislocating his shoulder and putting it back into place on the field. And one thing I wanted to bring up is in the 69th minute, Minnesota has a free kick that's within shooting distance. Danny and Maxi are like the 2-man wall, just standing in between the shooter and the near post. And so Stuver lines them up. The shot comes off. I think it's Sonny Dotson hits it and he blasts it off the post. And as you watch the replay back, the ball goes right in between Danny and Maxi. And so like, you can like, if you ever watch Stuver, he gives instructions to the wall and he'll usually like often he'll say tight up. And so it means like stay together and jump when they kick it. That's what I want you to do. And as he's kicking it, they split apart by about a yard and a half and then kind of jump outwards. And the ball goes right in between them. And Stuver makes a miraculous save to keep it from going in. And so Stuver's yelling at them afterwards. And this actually happens again against RSL. He puts Danny and Maxi in the wall and they jump separately. I think this time it didn't actually go between them, but it very well could have. And so this is just the thing that I noticed that like teams watch film and they're going to see that they do that. Like they need to sort that out because you can't have guys just shooting uncontested shots at our goalie every time.
Right. And that's for this game. I happened to be fairly close to the north end and really down low and could hear even a little bit of Brad's displeasure with how that went. But there was no doubt he was super animated. I think the big, so right before that is when we get all the offensive substitutions, Juicy comes in, and then he scores what turns out to be the game-winning goal in the 82nd minute with an assist by Julio Cascante.
Yeah, so this is a Nick Lima long throw from the right-hand side. Cascante is able to kind of like duel with the guy, and like he doesn't quite win the ball, but makes the ball fall down into the mixer there. It kind of pinballs around. It's lost in a sea of legs, and then finds its way to Mr. Right Place, Right Time, Sebastian Driussi. He slots it into the far post. And so it seemed like a little bit of a lucky bounce to find his way to Driussi. But upon the replay, Cascante like is able to swing his leg at it and it kind of like gets blocked or he misses it and then turns around.
He's kind of like sweeping the ball back, right? A little bit.
He had seen Driussi on that side and just kind of like, it's like he extends his leg backwards and kind of like soul rolls the ball back towards where Driussi was. And it falls right to him. And so it looked a little bit lucky, but like I 100% believe that Cascante had seen Driussi there and was like, I'm just going to do what I can to flick the ball that direction. And it went straight to him.
Yeah, it was beautiful. And then it did not make for, it was still a really nervy finish. As we mentioned, plenty of chances for Minnesota United between that goal and the end of the match.
And a goal that got called off for offside in the 87th minute.
Oh, so that's right.
The ball went in the back of the net. And it got called off, and rightly so. It was off, but it was pretty chaotic, and so I didn't know in the moment what was going on. All I knew is like in the moment that like eventually the ref called it offside. But that was a scary moment. And then, like we said, Stuver saves a bunch of shots, and they're able to see it out and win it 2-1.
Yeah, so that's put Austin, I think it's by the end of the night, Austin was maybe in 8th. I think it doesn't really matter too much. We'll look at it for the full week, but kind of feeling good about things and maybe riding a little high and have an RSL club that was in, I think, 12th in the West or whatever coming in like for a home match. One would think that Austin was in a pretty good place to follow up, maybe create a little momentum and create a little momentum at home. One of the things we heard in the broadcast that bore itself out is like Q2 has not been a fortress. I think that was the debate last year earlier, right? Like, is Q2 a fortress? And Austin performances at home have not indicated that, and we would see that come to pass in the RSL match.
Yeah, so this game is one where I've talked to some people who disagree with me on this, but I honestly feel like overall we played a better tactical match against RSL than we did against Minnesota. I think against Minnesota, we kind of had like a more gritty match and kind of executed in the right moments. I feel like RSL was the opposite, where tactically, like we did fairly well and we were moving the ball well. We got lots of chances, but every time when it counted, we made an error, and just like a consistent lack of focus and concentration, and it let us down over and over and over, and failed to execute when it mattered over and over and over. And in a normal game, when you do that once or twice, like oftentimes like you get lucky and you get away with it because the other team's not able to capitalize on it, or they make a mistake or whatever. But whenever you do it repeatedly, you make these little mistakes repeatedly, it will eventually add up and beat you. And that happened in this game.
Let's talk about the lineup. I think we mentioned this a little bit with Adrian, but this is the first time in a while we've seen, at least on FOTMob and MLSsoccer.com, Austin line up in a 4-4-2. Is that accurate?
So listen, everybody. Listen, I have something to say. So whenever I made this big long rant a couple of weeks ago about how Austin FC doesn't have wingers anymore, forget about all that. We have wingers again. This was very much defending in a 4-4-2, which was the shape that we saw, I think, most of the last 2 years. My memory is terrible. I don't remember what we did in 2021, but in 2022, the defensive shape was almost always a 4-4-2. and then the attacking shape would be more of like a 4-3-3. On Saturday, defensive shape was a 4-4-2, and the attacking shape was almost like a 4-2-4. And so you ended up having the straight back four with Lima and Gallagher as your fullbacks, Danny Pereira and Johan Valencia as your two central midfielders, and then who are the wingers here? Fagundes and Redes were the starters.
Yeah,
they were pushing up really high when we had the ball, and then you had Urruti and Rigoni also pushing up very high when we had the ball. Rigoni did have a bit more freedom and was kind of floating over to that right side, and so it's hard to say exactly what shape is, and like again, like these names for shapes are only useful in so much as they actually help you understand what it is. But you could call it like a 4-4-2, a 4-2-4, even like a 4-2-3-1 because of the freedom that Rigoni had there. But we did have wingers again. And so I think like Adrian Healey later on in the show will talk about how he thought maybe that limited what our fullbacks were able to do. But it did seem like there was some other positives as far as like able to move the ball and get into some spots further forward. And so going forward, it is going to be a bit of a trick to figure out what's the best shape and what gets your best players on the field. So like, do you think that this is prepping to get Driussi in better spaces, or is this more of a product of not having enough center backs to do what he wants to do with rested players?
This is a little bit of the conversation that Kevin and I had on the last show about whether, how committed Josh was to like playing the three center backs and two wing backs, no matter what. But I mean, I think given sort of the goal scoring drought this year, I mean, I can see that hopefully Josh is being thoughtful and that like finding a way to maximize Sebastian Driussi is the thing that's going to make the biggest difference in terms of changing the way Austin's going to play this year. So I would hope that we would see more of this and trying to maximize his performance. Because I think that's going to be what has to happen in order for Austin to progress.
Yeah, and I think like between either shape, like I think Driussi will fit into either one and be okay. But the difference is being able to play Driussi and all of our other better attacking players, because that's where I think it gets complicated. And so like I think Driussi will be fine in whatever, but this like front four look does get it puts guys like Rigoni and Fagundes in places where they are going to be more comfortable.
And I would like to see this with Giassi up front, up top, right? Other than Maxi, which we haven't seen a lot of, because like I feel like Urruti has not done hardly anything with the minutes so far this year. And I'd like to see what it looked like. I'd like to see what Giassi looks like in this 4-4-2.
Yeah. So the first goal in this one comes, I think, against the run of play. So Justin Glad, center back, plays a long diagonal to their left back, and then Michael Chang kind of makes the vertical run in that inside channel. In that moment, nobody really commits to cover that run, and so Rodney Redes, who is tracking back, just keeps following Chang into the box. And then the ball gets dropped back into the midfield to Jasper Loffelson. Again, nobody recognized that Rodney had followed that runner, and so nobody commits to go and put pressure on Loffelson either. And so Rodney turns around, and he's the guy. He followed the run into the box, and is also the guy stepping back out to put pressure. And so Loffelson ends up just putting a perfectly free cross into the box from not that far out, and is able to find Rubio Rubin's head to put it in for the goal. So whatever like defensive rotation was supposed to happen there clearly failed. I don't know who was supposed to cover that spot, but regardless, like someone needs to recognize the situation. Once Rodney is in the box, Johan Valencia needs to know that, or Rigoni or whoever's job that is needs to recognize the situation they're in and step and go cover that spot, because like maybe Rodney wasn't supposed to be there in the first place, but he was. And so we need to fix it now. And that didn't happen.
Yeah, that one was definitely a team failure with all the way around, no doubt. And then that was most of the action, right? Up until the lightning delay. I don't think there was a lot of great chances outside of that.
Yeah, and like in in this game, like if you look on FotMob, or I've been using an app called SofaScore a lot lately, but they have these momentum charts, and it's a pretty good indicator of like who's keeping the ball in dangerous areas longer. And if you look at that for the first 39 minutes, is heavily in favor of Austin FC, even after that first goal. And so when that goal goes in, I was thinking like if we keep playing like this and just start executing a little bit better, I think Austin FC is still the favorite to win this game. And so the rain delay comes. We hang out in the stadium for 2 hours. How was your rain delay, by the way, Jeremiah?
Well, it was not bad at all because I was at an event. um, and the rain delay let me get home in time to watch the whole second.
Oh, and
half.
actually watch the
yeah,
second
and
half.
actually watched the rest of the game. I watched from like minute 30 to 40 on my phone at a table at an event, and the rain delay happened. And I drove home in a boring rainstorm and watched. And I tried to convince Brandy that we could probably just get in the stadium and watch the second half, and she was not on board with that. Probably because she was in a cocktail dress. So it turned out to be pretty good for me. But I've heard from my coworker Ed Coates, who ended up in my seats, that 106, the canopy is very good. That he stayed really dry almost the whole time, even the hard stuff was coming in, and he felt like it was a pretty good experience.
Oh yeah. We ended up taking a walk. They close off the concourse on the south end, and so you can only make like the horseshoe loop there. And so we walked around and went over. I didn't realize you weren't there, so we went over to look for you, and then Mike and Steph sit over there as well. We ended up finding Mike and went on a quest for pizza rolls with Mike, and then he had never seen our seats, and so we took him up to our seats and just kind of sat up in our seats for a while. So all in all, it was like we made the most of it, but the real dread was like, okay, we still have to watch most of a soccer game when this starts back up and then drive home after that. And so that was the part I wasn't looking forward to. But the actual break, we were able to make it fairly enjoyable.
Yeah, and I guess the one thing on the TV part of that is like it's super annoying if they did Apple TV just on the broadcast has we're in a weather delay in 3 different languages, like flipping, like scrolling over and over and over again. And I guess
That is annoying.
Yeah.
I was kind of figuring like they would like flip it over to a different game so you could just like keep that feed on. So maybe they should.
Yeah, you think
they would
flip to a different game or flip it to Austin 360, or like Adrian will suggest maybe flip it to La Murga, with some stand-ups or whatever. Yeah. But yeah, it's just that repeating scroll. Obviously, you could turn it to MLS 360 on your own, but you want to miss like any news about when the game might come back. Right. So I feel like it's a gap in the broadcast.
Yeah, they should have a solution for that. So after they come back out, like I was saying, the first up until that point, Austin was fairly dominant. I still feel like for big stretches they were the better team, but it was much less clear after that, and that's when RSL started getting some more clear-cut chances. They end up getting a second goal in the not until the 81st minute. They had some other chances before then, but this one again comes from a lack of focus. So Stuver saves a shot that comes from it's a goal kick that like catches ahead and kind of squirts through behind our back line. I feel like somebody should have been marking there, kept that guy. It's just like little bitty things that just kept happening over and over. And this is one where we almost got punished for and then did get punished for. So Stuver actually saves the shot, the first one. It falls to Lundqvist. And this is where another lack of awareness comes in. Lundqvist has nobody around him. And maybe like Stuver wasn't able to like stand up and see around and give him a shout, but there's nobody near him. And he like rushes to clear the ball, plays a really terrible clearance and plays it right to the feet of, I can't remember the number 11. I can't remember his name. He was a sub that came on. That was a really dangerous player last season for them.
Carlos Gomez.
Yeah, there you go. He plays it straight to Gomez. We have not many players back, already reeling from that first shot, and Lundqvist gives it away directly to a guy who's very good at just driving straight into the box. And so he carries it forward, plays a cross in. His cross goes to like the back post, gets played back across the box. Ring and Jafal aren't able to react fast enough to either win the ball or to mark Rubin close enough, and Ruby Rubin just buries it past Stuver. So it's again just little lapses in focus and concentration that lead to these moments of us getting punished for it. And I talked a while back about how Austin's defensive shape was kind of leading to them being a bit more sturdy defensively. In the Minnesota game, I feel like our defense was terrible, and we were like pressing one at a time. And there's just like these mental things that are not working, and it's like we're never going to be an elite defensive team with the personnel that's on this team. And so like either organization or fight or a combination of those two things, like fight and focus, is the only way we're going to be a good defensive team. And if they're not focused and turned on all the time, then we're going to lose every game 2-1.
Yeah, I wanted to go back to like one attempt, the one Austin attempt before that, which is I think created like a third or close to a third of Austin's goal in the night, and that was Juicy's attempt in the 58th minute. That I don't know. It's like it looked like he tried to chip the goalkeeper and didn't, or
yeah,
it was just one of those. It was one of those moments I feel like that was like illustrative of the whole night, where like there was an idea and like the execution was really poor, and it's odd for that to happen from Sebastian Driussi, because usually it's the kind of goal that he just like scores out of nowhere, and this was actually a really like a high percentage chance that he kind of muffed.
Yeah, it like the ball, it kind of catches him weird. Like the ball bounces weird and kind of gets caught under his legs. And then when it does fall off, like he swings at it and it's a little bit too far. And so like I don't think it's as easy as it seems, but it's one that like last year he scores that every time,
all the time,
right?
every time. So, yeah.
I honestly thought Sebastian Driussi, he came. What minute did he come on in? Do you remember?
He came on 46.
So it was at halftime. He subbed on at halftime.
Yeah, okay. At halftime.
I thought Sebastian Driussi was quite poor in this game, and that feels very strange to say. But I've thought there was a few moments where he like tried to take over the buildup when he shouldn't have. Because like talking about like tactical adjustments and like improvements in this team, one thing where we have actually been very strong this year is beating a press. Like we've not really had much trouble with pressing teams this year. It's one thing we've like, there have been changes made and we've been good at it. And so there are times when Danny and Johan had the ball kind of deep and there wasn't a ton of pressure on them, and Driussi would drop in and take the ball off of him. It's like, no, just like stay closer to goal and like let them do the thing that they're doing consistently, and you can get the ball in a more dangerous area. And then other times where he would maybe hold on to it a little bit too long and lose it instead of just making a simple pass. It seemed to me like he was trying to be a bit too much of a hero when it's like the team actually functions fairly well in certain parts of the field without you there. And so like stay in the part where you're going to be more dangerous and let them bring it to you. And I feel like he maybe just got like a little too eager to take over the game, and it kind of hurt us a little bit, I thought.
Yeah, it was one of his poorest performances on the year. So that Austin gets Lucas Conte can say kind of a garbage time goal, but it's fine. It makes the scoreline look a little bit better at 90+2, which is basically the dying moments of the match, which leads to a 2-1 final result. Do you have anybody you want to talk about before we sort of get into the state of the team and the coach and all that? Because we want to save a little bit of time for that discussion, I think.
No, I mean, again, like I feel like nobody had a great game. Valencia's put together a string of pretty good performances, but I don't think there's anybody who didn't make some type of little mistake or lost focus or concentration and messed up here or there at some point or another. Like I feel like everybody did, and it was just happening a lot.
So as of right now, Austin sits 8th in the Western Conference, which I believe is maybe where Austin was before the match.
It was, yeah.
Okay, so Austin's lost no ground. Yeah, 17 goals, 16 matches, sitting on 19 points. There's this giant group of teams between like 6 and 12 that Austin's kind of a part of, and I feel like there's some part of the rest of the season that seems somewhat likely that Austin's going to kind of be part of this mass of clubs, and depending on health and form and whatever, maybe we'll make a run to the playoffs or maybe won't. But there was a lot of overall negativity among the fan base, I think, online, um, in person, in Slack, and everywhere else, sort of about where Austin is and where the coach is. And so I guess the question, again, like we're back to this already for the first time in a while, but like, are you wolf in or wolf out, Landon?
Yeah, I think when we had our like debate episode uh in the off
It
season
had to have been
last
in
year, I guess it
2021, right?
was. I think
Maybe,
it was in the
yeah,
off
maybe.
season, maybe.
Okay.
Um, I didn't want to like firmly plant my flag on one side or the other, and so I think like a good question is like, what would make you plant your flag firmly in one side or the other? Because I think we're both to a degree somewhere in the middle, maybe on different sides of the middle, but in the middle still. And
Still
so
in the
like,
bell curve, but maybe on different ends a little
yeah.
bit. Yeah.
So like, what
Okay.
would make you like choose firmly one side or the other?
Yeah. So I'll summarize my position is like, I'm disappointed. I feel like the results have been disappointing. And I know there's injuries and a lot of other things to go down to it. And I don't feel like now is the time to make a big change because the sporting director situation is not sorted. And I feel like Austin's has possibly made a mistake of hiring a coach before a sporting director, and where there's not like a lot of alignment. So I would say if there's actual, and this is something I don't know because I'm not there, but like if Josh Wolf has lost the locker room, then I would 100% be in favor of replacing Josh Wolf with Davey Arnaud, and Davey Arnaud being an interim coach between now and the end of the year, and then Austin trying to figure it out. Because I don't think there's any need to make a move for a big name right now. But that's where I would be. Like if there's evidence that the players have like stopped trying or don't care or like in revolt or whatever, or they feel rewarded with their contracts, they're going to be soft. Like then I can see making a change, but I don't know that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Is like what we know and what we don't know is like I feel like there's a lot of Josh Wolf fan fiction happening out there where people are speculating or taking a rumor of a rumor and then like running with it and then talking about it as if it's fact. And like that's stuff that really bothers me because like this is I know it's like a hobby and we have a lot of feelings about it and like our our feelings are valid. Like the fact that people are angry at the team and angry and want to put it somewhere, and some people are choosing to put it specifically on Josh Wolf. The fact that we don't know so much and could never know so much, it makes it hard for me to say like this is the problem. And so yeah, if we start having players coming out and publicly saying, or like even like press leaks or whatever, coming out and saying like, hey, like we saw in Toronto after that game, like players were saying directly to the media, like, hey, things aren't good here. We should maybe change things. We've not gotten to that point. Like we've maybe heard like whispers of a rumor from like third hand communication that like maybe this guy isn't like 100% in love with playing for Josh Wolf, but we've never heard anybody just outright say like, yeah, the locker room's really toxic. Like nobody likes him. Nobody's motivated. We've never heard any of that. And maybe we never would, even if it were true. And so like, I think it's important to keep that in mind. Like we don't know, like we don't know any of that. We also don't know, like talking about the sporting director, like which players were Wolf's players. Like did Wolf get saddled with a bad Claudio Reyna roster build and is dealing with that? Or was he super involved with all of it? Like, I don't know. Like we don't know. And so until we have all of that information, I feel like it's an overly emotional thing to say like Josh Wolf is the problem because we don't have that information. That being said, like, yeah, if we did get information saying players are mad, yes, I would be fine with firing him. Like if the players aren't doing it, I think as the season goes on, if we don't make the playoffs, I would be okay if they let him go. But until then, like, I don't think this should be an emotional decision. I think this needs to be a very logical decision. Do we have a sporting director in place? Is there a better coach available right now? Like these are things that I would like to have answered before you just fire a coach on principle because the fans don't think it's good enough.
Yeah. But I mean, yes, I agree with that. There is a lot of, I don't know. There's articles online today sort of about like the way the data lines up, but it's hard to know, to your point, where overall, Austin has underperformed what people would want out of the first 3 seasons, but who knows? Like all the factors that go into that. What do you think the ambitious move is? Like we talked about, like is Austin a big club? Is it Austin an ambitious club? Austin's spending like an ambitious club, and maybe they're like spending foolishly. So maybe they aren't. Like what do you see? Like what lays the stake in the ground about where Austin stands?
I think there's 2 pretty different takes you could have on that question. And one is like you hear references to other leagues and other countries saying like Wolf would have never made it this far in different leagues in different countries. And my response to that is like, just because something is normal doesn't necessarily mean it's good. And like the stakes are, and Adrian will talk about this in the interview with him a little bit later, how like there isn't always enough pressure on MLS teams or MLS coaches because there's no relegation. It's pretty easy to make the playoffs. For that reason though, they're like the stakes are lower. And so like you can afford to leave a coach in a little bit longer. And so I think it's very reasonable to say like the ambitious thing is to say this isn't good enough. Let's get him out, bring someone else who we think can do a better job. I think there's an opposite opinion or an opposite theory saying like Josh Wolf was always a long-term hire. They did not hire a first-time head coach thinking he's going to step in and be the finished product year 1 or even year 3 probably. And so the fact that we're building a system based on like what he's doing and we're having success at it, like U15's won GA Cup, the second team is one of the best teams in MLS Next Pro. Like the system is working at these other levels. And so even if you don't think Josh Wolf is the guy who's going to win the most games with the first team, setting this team up with a system long-term, I think you could argue that's a different kind of ambition, and that the fact that they're spending this much money and have been willing to move players around as much, I think the club is ambitious. And so I don't know that like not firing Wolf is going to come firmly from a lack of ambition, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't think it's that way, but I guess I can see sticking with Josh Wolf past when other people might be ready to get rid of Josh Wolf coming from a lack of ambition, I think is where I see it. And I think that move, that move's really about the offseason, right? Because, I get long-term projects, but also we spent 2 years talking about like, thank God we're not Cincinnati.
Yeah.
And it took 18 months of like Cincinnati bringing in Philadelphia's like number 2 to go from like perennial wooden spoon winners to like competing for the Supporter Shield. So I don't think that a roster build necessarily has to take that long, but ultimately I agree. Like Austin shouldn't do anything rash. And we probably don't, none of us have the information we need to really have as definitive an opinion as some of us do. But like I'm fairly negative long-term on how this project's working.
Yeah, I think that's fair. What do you think it takes to get him fired mid-season? Like, do you think that's possible?
I think it has to be open locker room revolt. I think that's the only thing that makes it happen. It's like people like Sebastian Driussi talking to the media about how like it's a garbage place to be is like the one thing that makes it happen. Or I guess as Adrian will say in a minute, or like a giant unifying fan response to it.
Yeah. And I think the likelihood of that, either of those two things happening are maybe made possible by Austin FC like staying below the playoff line for an extended period of time in the near future. I think that's probably what would cause either of those things to happen, because as upset as people are this week on Twitter, I could see with 1 or 2 results like that subsiding a little bit, and it will subside a little bit. The fires are stoked at this point and they're not going to go away easily, but the pendulum swings pretty easily with results usually.
Yeah, usually do. Okay, I feel like we spent enough on this. I feel like we've been pretty we've aired a lot of grievances on this show. So I guess you want to take another break and wrap it up?
Yeah, let's do it. We're going to take one more break. We'll be back with Adrian Healey to preview the Sporting Kansas City match.
Moon Tower Soccer is brought to you by Covert Ford. The Coverts have been meeting the needs of local car buyers for 114 years because of their service, financial expertise, and support after the sale.
In addition to supporting car buyers, Covert's an important part of the soccer community and an official automotive partner of Austin FC.
And now Covert Ford has a hot deal on a 2023 Ford Bronco. Stock number PLB 27534 is available for a sale price of $36,408 plus tax, title, and license. With tax, title, and license down, plus a first payment of $32,3883, this Bronco can be yours for just $478 a month over 36 months.
If you're in the market for a new or used vehicle, be sure to check out covertford.com.
Moon Tower Soccer is brought to you by Sage Wilson Realty. Thanks to Sage Wilson Realty, we'll be giving away tickets to an upcoming match. So fill out the form in the show notes and enter for your chance to win.
Again, this is made possible by Sage Wilson Realty. So if you or someone you know are in need of Sage real estate advice in Austin, talk to our friends at Sage Wilson Realty. You can check them out online at sagewilson.com. All right, we are back, and we are thrilled to be joined by our old friend, Adrian Healey. Adrian, thanks for being on, man.
Oh, guys, thank you once again for having me on. And I feel like I've seen both of you outside of the pod relatively recently. Jeremiah at the what was it? The Turnstile?
Turnstile, yeah. U.S. Open Cup match. Yep.
No, that was the Open Cup game. Yes. Happy days against New Mexico and Landon just on Congo Street. Well, actually, that was probably like a month or so ago. But
yeah, we need to make that one happen again. We'll talk after we get done recording. But for now, we have you on to talk about Sporting Kansas City. You called this last Austin match in Austin, didn't you?
Yes. You mean the one that only just finished?
Yeah, the one where we'll be talking about it earlier in this show, later in actual chronology. Is that just a coincidence, or is that intentional, putting you on 2 Austin games in a row?
That's a very good question. I don't know. I actually really don't know. It is the first time it's happened. I can tell you it will be happening later in the summer because I'm going to get all 3 Leagues Cup games in July being played here, including the game between Juarez and Mazatlan. So that'll be 3 games in a row at Q2, which I'm already looking forward to. But yeah, it's the first time. I don't know that there was any reason that we got RSL here and then Kansas City away. We have been to Kansas City, me and Kobe, to do a game before, so maybe it was just the luck of the draw. And actually, the last time we were there was to do the Galaxy game, which is the club Kobe's most closely associated with. So maybe something to their planning, but or maybe that's a stretch.
Looking at Sporting Kansas City, they're currently 12th in the West. One of the teams who has had a worse start than Austin FC. Eric Tommy, Daniel Shallowy, Johnny Russell, and a couple of other guys have actually played quite well throughout the season, especially as of late. Johnny Russell is out for a few weeks now with a hamstring. Willie Agata had a good back half of the year last year, is also out with injury now. But they have Alan Pulido and Gadi Kinda, 2 guys who were big for them last year or in the last couple of years, back from injury now. And so, like I said, they started poorly, but saw an improved run of form. Well, I think losing 1 time in the last 6 games. In their most recent game, it seemed like they were maybe lucky to sneak away with a point in Vancouver. But all in all, are looking stronger as a team.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, timing is not everything in life, but it's a big thing, isn't it? And I think, unfortunately, our timing is awful in this respect. We should have been playing Sporting Kansas City in March or April because they were the worst team in the league. They were battling Montreal for being the worst team in the league. Couldn't score. Went 10 games without a win. And then it was interesting because they kind of had an internal kind of moment and blow up. And you mentioned one of those guys, Johnny Russell. He basically came out and said, "Look, I don't know how you fix this. We don't look anything like the team we were before. I don't know how you fix it." It was a very public sort of, kind of not finger pointing, but listen, we know this isn't good enough. What did they do? They went out and won the next game in Seattle. Just like Austin did. They went up to Seattle and won that game. That was right at the start of the May. And they basically haven't looked back. In the month of May, they were the second best team in the entire league, only behind Cincinnati. So yeah, our timing is awful because we're running into a team who seem to have found themselves and rediscovered their identity, and they've had three big home wins in a row against Minnesota and Portland and Dallas. So they're beating good teams at home. So we undoubtedly have our work cut out for us to go up there. What we do have is history on our side, and they are a team we've beaten 3 games in a row. So can we go and make it 4 is the question.
Yeah, I was thinking about that for a club that hasn't been around for forever. Austin definitely has some history with Sporting KC. There's that history. And then I also remember, I don't know, okay, 2019, wasn't the Adrian? Sorry, I'm looking at Adrian while going through this. Was this the Alexander Ring red card that like was where the wheels fell off from like the best start for an expansion franchise in history to like what happened over the last few months? I think that was a Sporting KC match, if I remember right.
Yes. Yeah.
Where it kind of turned into a mess. And that was also where we saw the first time that we saw John Gallagher at fullback, I think was in the same season, but later. So there's like a lot of, for a short history between two teams, there's like a lot of important moments in Austin FC history that have involved Sporting KC.
Yeah. And our timing was actually great last year in our great run. Yeah, we beat them twice in quick succession. Away first, we won 2-0. You might remember that Alex Ring was also involved in that game because he had a goal that was kind of thrown in by their goalie, John Poolskamp, who may well be their goalie again on Saturday, by the way. And then they came down to Q2, and that was the comeback of all comebacks, the 4-3 with Driussi getting the winner late. So it's three consecutive wins against Sporting Kansas City, and they to me, guys, are a reminder, and I think we probably all do need a reminder of this, is how quickly fortunes can change in this league. I mean, you look at the arc of their last 2 years has been remarkable. I mean, they were great in 2021, finished 3rd in the West, and then everyone thought they'd be challenging last year, and they had an awful year. But they actually finished the season really strong. I don't know if you remember it. After our 2 games against them, they finished on a tear, but couldn't quite make the playoffs. And everyone assumed they would just pick up where they left off at the start of this year. Well, no, 10 games without a win, and 2 goals. I mean, it was a historically bad start by Sporting Kansas City this season, and yet in the blink of an eye, they turn it around and start. I mean, it is classic MLS, and just hold on to that thought, because things can change very quick, real quick.
So changing focus to Austin a little bit. Yeah. I can't remember when the last time we talked to you was, but we've seen some tactical shifts from Josh Wolf throughout the season. One of the latest ones was this last game against RSL, where we saw him run out. We'll maybe decide what to call it in the other part of the show, but the attacking shape was something akin to like a 4-4-2 or a 4-2-4 kind of look. And then we're defending in a 4-4-2. Do you have a sense of, or a feeling of like one shape or one direction that is the way for them to go? Or do you think all of that is kind of secondary and the rest is execution against that plan and kind of individual performances within those shapes?
Yeah. They definitely, watching that game on Saturday, guys, they felt like, to me, they were a team in search of a solution, who were kind of doubting themselves a little bit. And I was a little mystified they went back to the back four, because I thought the 3 centre-back alignment had been working reasonably well. I mean, particularly in the absence of Sebastian Driussi, and because I thought it really got the best out of attacking fullbacks. I think Lundqvist has been excellent of late down the left, and Gallagher had been great down the right. And I just thought going back to that 4-man backline Lundqvist didn't even play. Gallagher was switched over to the left-hand side. So I just thought it negated what had been some of our strengths of late by doing that. And now I'm sure there were some very valid tactical reasons and fitness reasons for doing it, but we could have still played 3 at the back, even
one of which is just not having enough center backs, right?
Well, I mean, but you think about the Minnesota home game, he had started Lima and Ring and Cascante as the 3 center backs. He could have done that against RSL and just played Gallagher and Lundqvist. So, but he made the switch. And I just thought it took away some of what had been working well for us in this last stretch of a month or so. So where do they go moving forward? Well, that's the question, because obviously with Driussi coming back, you have to tailor it to his strengths. But is there a way of getting Driussi in the starting lineup and still having the two attacking wing backs and 3 centre backs? I don't know. Does the math work? That's the question. I'd like to see it. I would.
Yeah, I think it is a tough problem to solve. I think in the shape that we saw on Saturday, he fits pretty easily into it and did slot back into the spot we expected him to. But it's a tough puzzle to solve to get him into that other shape. But hopefully we'll see Radovanovic back and healthy to play. It seems like his prognosis is kind of up in the air still.
Yeah.
But like that, I think that could determine what Wolf does as well, because if you are going to have to rotate some of like the wingback guys, we need to rotate those guys as well. And if we don't have enough to do that and play 3, we can't even play 3 real center backs, but 3 guys who have played center back like it gets tough to do. Yeah.
I'm talking obviously with the 3 centre back alignment, that would have been 2 players playing out of position, but they had done it just 3 nights before in a game we won. Yeah. Radovanovic, it's frustrating. I would have loved to have seen more minutes overall from him, and I thought he played well when he came on against Minnesota. It was frustrating. He picked up that shoulder problem that kept him out on Saturday, and the clock is ticking on him as well, because he's only with us until the end of June. Right. So I don't know if there's a decision that's got to be made at that point, but you'd like to see more of it, because he's shown that he could certainly bring something that we don't have at the moment.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I know there's a decision to be made, but I feel like I've seen enough of him to feel like he should be the guy that we want to hang on to long term, that is showing a lot of promise. Unlike the Washington Caruso experiment last year, where you saw 11 minutes out of the guy or whatever. And Radovanovic is also very Serbian, right? Because he's got the shoulder thing and maybe a couple minor broken bones somewhere. And I don't know, there was like three different types of injuries he has. And they're still like, but he might play Saturday, because that's just the kind of guy he is.
Right. You just get up and get on with it. Little cold sponge and you're fine. So,
Adrian, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna ask Adrian, during the rain delay, so you had 2 hours of hanging out. What are y'all doing during that time?
That is a very good question indeed. I was fielding texts from people saying, "Can we come up and say hi?" Because we don't have anything else to do. And we honestly weren't able to leave the booth because we kept on hearing, there's going to be a decision made in 20 minutes. We might have to come back on the air and just do a quick. Here we are. The rain's still coming down. The lightning's still flying. So,
and then 2 hours later,
end, we didn't have that much to do for those 2 hours, except to watch lots of other games in progress, which most of the people in the stadium were doing. It was amazing that so many people stayed. I was blown away by that, and the supporters end did keep us entertained mightily. So that was a fantastic sort of experience to share, even though it wasn't shown. I was trying to argue we should have come on the air and actually just done a couple of minutes of showing what the supporters were doing in the rain, but I lost that argument. So just glad to be able to finish it on the night. There was talk at some point they'd reached the stage of actually asking some of the crew if they were available to come back the next day, because I think they were starting to get worried that if it went much later, there'd be some sound ordinance they were going to be in trouble of violating, and they were starting to look at options for actually completing it the next day, which would have been interesting. But thankfully, it didn't get to that.
So we're talking about Peter Vermes and Sporting Kansas City kind of struggling. There were folks in Kansas City calling for Peter Vermes to be fired, which would be a pretty big move by a club like that. There's also fans in Austin after this weekend's result calling for Josh Wolf's head. I guess A, what are your thoughts on that in general? And B, do you think what do you think needs to happen throughout the rest of the season in order for that to actually be a possibility for this club?
Well, I will tell you this. I think, and we've already seen it in two different instances around the league, that sort of pressure on a manager or management in this league can only genuinely come from the fans. It only can. I mean, look at what the LA Galaxy have done. Their fans organized, they protested, rightly so, and started staying away, and they've got a result, haven't they? They Chris Klein is gone. They seem to have turned over a new leaf, and that was completely and utterly down to the fans. There was no other pressure, internal or external, that was going to make that happen. And that's the situation in this league. There aren't enough external pressures to cause pipes to break. There just aren't. Like you get in other leagues where you get constant media attention and questions being asked, and here it's more. It has to be more organic. It has to come from the fans, and I do sense that discontent amongst the fan base, and it's real. How that materializes, I don't know. But all I'm saying is my experience in this league is that's the only avenue to real change, because there's no threat of relegation. There's no, there's long-term contracts. There's a lot of comfort, and you hear people talk about pressure. There's no real pressure in this league, not in the same way.
So you heard it here, folks. Here first, folks. Adrian Healey is calling for the fans to rise up against Josh Wolf.
if that's what they want, if they've made the assessment that that's what they want, it is up to them. It really is, because no one else is going to do it. So,
all right, yeah. We'll probably talk about this in the rest of the show as well. Yeah. Anything else, Jeremiah?
No. I was going to ask, because we haven't in a while. How's it working with Michael and the Verde Lights gig? So I've watched a few shows, and they seem to be pretty well produced and pretty high quality. Are you enjoying their chance to still be sort of a part of the Austin experiment there?
Oh, fantastic! Absolutely, guys. For me and Michael, it's just a treat. Primarily, still to be able to work together with each other, because it's still to me a travesty that he wasn't brought in as part of the Apple thing, and I still think that might change somewhere down the line. Has to, in fact. But our Verde Lights, so we call it our Thursdays. So we do we actually do two shows. We do that Match Day -1 show for the club. We tape that on Thursday, and then we go down to KXAN and we do Verde Lights together with whichever host happens to be. It's a rotating cast of hosts. So it's Roger Wallace sometimes, it's Nick Bannon, their weather guy, it's Jonathan, it's Noah. But me and Michael really enjoy, so we get to hang out for most of that day together, and it's a very precious time to us to be able to spend together and just talk Austin nonstop. That's what we're there to do. So it's calling games together was the best experience ever, and this is kind of this is, if we can't have that, this is the second best thing to do. We still get to talk about the club. So.
All right. Well, Adrian, it has been a pleasure as always. Folks, you can listen to Adrian and Kobe Jones on the call this Saturday, Austin FC versus Sporting Kansas City in Kansas City. Hopefully we'll get to do this again soon. And I'm not sure if you'll get a break during international break or anything like that. But if you do, I hope you get some well-needed rest.
Thank you, guys, very much indeed. And yeah, as I say, back at it for the Leagues Cup. Looking forward to that. That's going to be kind of a break, even though it's going to be a lot more games. It's just going to be different games.
And not having to travel as much as well.
Right. Exactly. Keep up the good work, guys. Do a great job.
Thank you, Adrian.
Thanks, Adrian.
All right. We want to thank Adrian one more time. Before we wrap up, we'd like to remind you to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Come find us online at LViajero87 and JBentley_ATX on Twitter, and then at Moon Tower Soccer on Twitter, Instagram, and which one did I not say? YouTube.
There you go, YouTube.
And then check out the Patreon. Thanks again for all the folks who have signed up and supported us. It means a lot to us. And then you can visit the Striker website where you can get a 30% discount with the code MoonTower23 with a capital M. Jeremiah, what should folks look out for there?
Well, we know that Striker does a good job of game coverage. We've also seen a couple other pieces this week We mentioned briefly the change in our ticket prices. Phil West wrote an article, Too Much Green for the Verdes, on fan response to ticket prices. And then there's also an Emmanuel Ramirez article about Denny Pereira's call up to the Venezuelan national team. So you can get more information on a couple of things that we talked about on the show by checking out thestriker.com.
All right. Well, thanks so much for listening, everybody. We appreciate everyone listening and spreading the word to your friends. We'll be back next week to review the Sporting Kansas City match, and just that
not
one.
Previewing a match.
Just that one. Not previewing a match, not recovering 2 matches, not previewing 2 matches. So we'll have to talk about what we want to do on that match and see if we can, I don't know, have something different or an interview or something. But we should take advantage of the break. But until then, I'm Landon Cottom.
I'm Jeremiah Bentley.
We'll catch you next time.
When no one is around.
Think for nothings, you never.
La gente. Oh my God.